So, hi everyone. So, first, thanks to the organizer for allowing me to give this speech. And also, I hope that you are all still with me. I know it was already a long afternoon. So, but after that, there will be the break. So, I will present the kind of tools that we are developing at the Laboratoire de Physique de l'École Normale Supérieure. So, we are developing this tool for various application in astrophysics, going from interstellar medium to cosmology. I will try to focus to interstellar medium, indeed, because we are at PCMI, but I will go from one application to another. So maybe during this talk, I will be focused also on the tools, but it's, you will see it's quite general. So the first thing is that, okay. When we want to work with the ISM, so we just saw that we have a very nice simulation. We also have a very nice observation. We also saw that. And I mean, at some point, we want to compare them. We want to be able to model the dust emission, and we want to be able to compare the results from the simulation and from the observation. And as we know, it's very difficult because we have a very nonlinear dynamics, so that leads to the formation of non-Gaussian structure. And it's related to the fact that the different scales in our processes are coupled, interact between each other. So which means that to characterize this kind of process, we need to go beyond power spectrum. And we need to be able to characterize this interaction between scales. So if we want to use statistics, what are the statistics to make this modeling and this comparison, and how could we use them to make this modeling and comparison? So if we want to use statistics, we know that we need to go beyond power spectrum. We want to also to characterize the non-Gaussian structures, and to do that, we want to be first exhaustive or close to exhaustive. Let's say try to characterize as much structure as we can and as much type of structure as we can. But we want also not to be too specific, because if we say, okay, we want to see some particular filamentary structure, it's probable that we miss some kind of information, because maybe it's not in one very specific kind of filamentary structure that is the information that we want to use to make the comparison between the different kind of data. Also, we want to have statistics that can be usable on a small amount of data, which is very important because, I mean, people invest a huge amount of effort to be able to have good quality simulated and observational data. And we cannot say, okay, give me 1,000 more maps and I will give you a first comparison. So it's important, if we have only a few patches on the sky and a few simulations, it's important to be able to make the comparison, to work with them. And finally, it's important to be able to make a physical interpretation, if possible, of the statistics that we use. So to try to give something, a solution, almost among the others that try to go in this direction, I will introduce the scattering transform statistics that we developed in our team at LPNS for a few years. And basically, it's halfway between summary statistics and neural networks. It has been developed 10 years ago, and it continues to be developed by people in data science, mainly the team of Stéphane Mala and his collaborators. And the idea of this statistic is that they are inspired from neural network construction, the fact to use nonlinearities, the fact to consider interaction between scales, but they do not need any training stage, which means that you can just consider how they are computed. You have all the steps that are given, and then you can just compute them on one image, and it's just like other summary statistics, like power spectrum, Bary's spectrum, and so on. And what we did in our team is that we applied, I mean, we work with them to be applied to astrophysics. So we consider the particular kind of field that we had, which was quite regular, quite smooth. And we modified and built again this kind of tools to be applied to astrophysics. And we gave also some first interpretation of the different terms. I won't enter into the details, but we did already some work on that. And so there will be several names. There is a wavelet scattering transform, WST, and its reduction. So wavelet phase harmonics. Just keep in mind that it's standard toolbox with different specific tools, but that I will call scattering transform in general. Okay. And as I said, this development has been done, in our team since for a few years. So mainly with at the people who were there from the beginning, so François Boulanger, François Levrier, and also Bruno Regaldo Saint-Blancard, a PhD student that is finishing his PhD thesis. So to give you just a very broad idea of how it works, so basically, you have a given process that you want to look at, you want to consider the interaction between the different scales. So the first thing that you do is that you separate the process at different scales using wavelets. It's not important if you don't know what wavelets are, but the main idea is that we separate the process at different scales. And then using nonlinearities, we consider interaction between the different scales of the process. And actually, the fact to be inspired from neural network, one of the main ideas really was to introduce nonlinearities, because people in statistics were, I mean, we didn't want at the beginning to introduce nonlinearities, but it works so much with neural networks that these people say, Stefan Mala and his collaborators say, okay, we should use nonlinearities. So the wavelet transform. So basically, I don't want to enter in the details, but you have a set of wavelets which are localized oscillation like that. And if you consider their Fourier transform, you see that these wavelets are like a bandpass filters that are probing a particular area of the Fourier plane. So what you will do is that by rotation and dilation, you will have a set of wavelets that characterize your whole process, the entire Fourier plane, sorry. And what you will do is that you will consider convolution between these wavelets and the field you are looking at. Basically, you are just bandpassing your field at different oriented scales, okay? And each wavelet will be related to what I call an oriented scale, or more generally a scale, okay? So here, an example of which kind of interaction we can consider. Here is the interaction in terms of alignment, phase alignment between different scales. It is you have an initial field. So here it's a matter density field from large-scale structure simulation, but the idea is always the same. So you make convolution with different wavelets at different scales, okay? So you see to the top, let's say it's a 8-pixel horizontal oscillation. At the bottom, it's, let's say, a 16-pixel horizontal oscillation. As the wavelets are complex, you recover the local amplitude of the oscillation at these scales and the local phase of the oscillation at these scales. The kind of information we would want to have is, for instance, to know if the phase between different scales align between each other, which is very important because when you have very fine, very sharp filamentary structure, it's related to some kind of phase alignment between different scales. But if you try to compute a correlation between these maps, basically you will have zero because the phase oscillate at different frequencies. So a very simple thing that you can do, in fact, is to consider a phase harmonic, which is to multiply the phase here of the large scale filtering by 2, let's say, and you have a new phase that oscillates at 8 pixels, but that is related to the phase of the structure at 16 pixels in the initial image. And then you can consider a correlation, and you will have an information that says to you if these two particular scales are statistically aligned in terms of phase, anti-aligned, or completely independent. Okay, and you see that's a way of building a coefficient WPH, wavelet phase harmonic, a moment, and you can build WPH statistic from a lot of a set of WPH moments. Okay, so I won't enter anymore in the details, but you see we can construct some kind of statistics using these tools in a very general way. So what can we do with this kind of statistics? Before going to the comparison between observation and simulation, one of the first things we can do is actually to model some process, because these statistics are very complex, close to exhaustive, or we hope they are close to exhaustive, but they are very complex in any case. So what you can do from one map, you can compute statistics, and then you can say, I will generate a new realization of the initial process just from its statistics, okay? So doing that, you will have a lot of new realization under the constraints, which are only the statistics. So that generating new realization, it's not like compression of information. It will be a new map, but with the same statistics. And to give you an example, here you have to the left a simulation of the large-scale structure, the one we saw before. And you can compute the statistic from one of several of these maps. And then we can generate new realization. And you have it to the right, okay? So with eyes, it's very close. We see the same kind of structure. And actually, we verified that we reproduce up to a few %, indeed, the power spectrum, but also the bispectrum, the Minkowski functional, the PDF, and so on. Most of the non-Gaussian statistics, the non-Gaussian structure are reproduced. And an advantage of that is that we can do this kind of modeling from a very reduced amount of data, which means that you could look at the sky, consider an observational patch, and say, okay, I learned the statistic from this patch, and I can generate a lot of the realization of the statistics that appear on this page, so the process that appear on this page. To give you an example, we wanted to apply it to a foreground removal. So it's something that you probably all know. One of the problem in at the interface between astrophysics and cosmology is to be able to detect B mode of the CMB. But you have foreground, okay? And the problem is what you see on the sky is this kind of thing to the left. You have the foreground plus the CMB. And to the right, you have the CMB. And the idea the question we ask of ourselves is, okay, let's imagine we have only one realization of the foreground. Is the generative model sufficient to learn the structure that makes the foreground and to be able then to remove the foreground from a CMB observation? And to test if our synthesis was sufficient, what we did is that we had only we took only one realization of the foreground. Okay, from this realization, we could compute these statistics with scattering transform, generate a lot of other foreground images realization, and then we know to generate a CMB. So we can just use all these foreground realization, the CMB we have, train a standard neural network, a moment network, and see if we are able just from this initial single image to learn sufficient amount of information to make the separation, the foreground removal. So to give you an example, you have the initial simulated map. So here we worked with polarized observation, okay? So we can generate with the statistic a lot of other maps that have the same statistics. So we expect the same kind of structure, not the same structure, but the same kind of structure. And for instance, we were able to train a neural network here. And you see that the neural network was able to make a lot of progress in terms of obtaining the proper CMB signal. So here you have the example on which you apply it. Indeed, it was a different simulation, of at least the same kind of simulation, but a different realization. And you see you have the true signal. Here, the mean posterior of the signal and the mean variance of the posterior for each pixel, okay? And we verified that you have a very good agreement. I mean, if you consider true minus mean and you divide by the standard deviation you obtain, you have a Gaussian mean 0, standard deviation 1. The error corresponds to what you have, which means that so already it's in itself it's very interesting because you have foreground removal from one single dust image, which couldn't be taken on the sky. But also it shows that the generative model built from the WPH contained most of the structure we could expect. So I won't enter in the details, but we continued to work on that, on component separation, but working directly on the WPH space. So on the scattering, on the statistic space, because the previous problem was easy because we had at least one realization of both signals. So the idea is, what do we do if we have two components, let's say, but we only know statistically one of the components? So it can be a polarized observation of the dust. Here it's Planck at 353 gigahertz in polarization. Or it could be, for instance, Herschel observation in intensity. You have the thermal emission of the dust, you have the CIB. Basically, you know the CIB statistically, or you could know from simulation or from patches of the sky where the CIB mainly dominate, but you don't know the dust. You want to be agnostic. Can you make this kind of separation? And here you have an example of when you applied it on some Planck, it's the Caméléon-Muscat region from Planck. So you see to the left, you have the noisy data. We only use some information about the statistic of the noise, and we were able to have the central image where we removed basically the noise statistically. And we were able to show on simulation that basically we reduce the level of the noise by 1 order of magnitude. And to the right, for comparison, you have, for instance, the map produced by GNIB. We are doing a lot of improvement to that. So we have a paper in preparation with Jean-Marc Deruy on the sphere. And also we have a new PhD student that begins with that, with this subject. So let's, okay. So to conclude, we have statistics that seems to characterize most of the structure we see on the sky. Can we use them to compare in a general way observation and simulation of the interstellar medium? That's the question. So the first thing is, does the statistics work well to make this kind of comparison? So a team from Harvard, so that's a PhD student, Andrew Saijari, tried to see already if this kind of tools were efficient to classify MHD simulation. So they took 8 sets of simulation with various isotropic, without gravity, ideal MHD. So they consider 8 sets of MHD simulation with various alphonic and sonic Mach number. And they compared 3-point correlation function, wavelet scattering transform, the initial tool that has been developed in data science, and the small number are the number of coefficients, and reduced wavelet scattering transform, which are the tools that we develop in particular for the kind of process we are looking at. And they introduce a linear classification method. I won't enter into the detail. Basically, as it's a linear classification method, you can project on the 2 more discriminating direction. So you have a projection on a plane. So you see what you have to the left for the 3-point correlation function, at the center for the WST, the initial tool from data science, and to the right for the reduced wavelet scattering transform. And you have the classification success, 51%, 54%, and 81% for the tools that we developed. And it was nice because basically 81, it was what the neural network they used, trained on this kind of data, was able to obtain, which means that without any training stage, we are able to obtain results which are as good as trained neural network. So if you, okay. So now, actually, it was a very simple problem because it was what people in data science called a supervised problem. Because we knew the label, so we can say, okay, this is this kind of simulation, this is this kind of simulation, learn how to recover this kind of simulation. When we arrive on the sky, I mean, we don't have label, we have nothing, and we have to compare in an agnostic way, let's say, comparison and simulation. So how to do that? So what I will present now are preliminary results obtained during the internship of Marie Laplace, and this work has been also done with Antoine Gusdorf and Pierre Le Saff, that were here to give the expertise in terms of observation and simulations. Okay, so the idea was to introduce a notion of distance. So we wanted to introduce a metric for a specific type of ISM data. So the first thing is that ISM is a very big world, so we restrict ourselves, and you will see to some kind of dense star-forming region for Coulomb density. So we took an ensemble of simulation and observational data. We asked to the people that did the simulation and people that did the observation, what do you think in advance are the data that should match at best? Okay, so they say, okay, take this simulation, so and this observation. Basically, to say you, it's that dense star-forming region. We took a lot of Herschel observation at several frequency in total intensity, and we took a lot of Coulomb density map from different MHD simulation from Patrick Henbel and Pierre Le Saff. So we took this ensemble of data, and we choose a set of statistics. We can try with power spectrum and scattering transform. And we define, you have a high dimensional space, which can be dimension 100, 150, and you can define a L2 distance. Then the first thing that you can do to try to see the structure of the data is to make some low dimensional mapping that preserves the distance. Okay, and you will see if some structure appear. And another huge question is, when you do this kind of, you introduce a metric, some distance, you have to define what is close or what is distance. Because if they say to you, okay, the distance is 8, you say, okay, it's 8, it's nice, but is it close, distant? And what we said ourselves is that if we have a lot of observational data, we will see all the data are positioned, the distance between all the different observational data. And it will give us an idea of all data in the nature and the observation are distant the one between each other. And the idea is to say, okay, do the simulated points go inside the data cloud, the observational data cloud, or is it outside of the cloud of points when you observe the data? So, so as I said, okay, I will finish because quick. So we use, from this huge data, we cut a lot of 256 patches at different resolution, which means that zooming or de-zooming on the simulation. We normalize each path in mean and standard deviation. And we consider power spectrum and reduced wavelet scattering transform. I will show only the reduced wavelet scattering transform. So we focused on very particular statistics that characterize the morphology of the structure. Okay, and we did a Salmon mapping, so it's a nonlinear projection in low dimension. The only thing you need to know is that in the plot I will show it's difficult to interpret the axis, okay? But the distance that you see is very related to the distance that you have in the initial space of the statistics, okay? So here you have preliminary results. So to say you, in blue and red, you have a lot of different observations from Herschel, okay, at different resolution, at different frequencies. So you see that you have some clouds of points that appear, but they are all close to some of the other observational data, which is what we expect. And in green and in violet, you have the two other big set of simulations we took. So the first answer of what we ask ourselves is that at the moment, and it's preliminary, the observation and the simulation seem not to match, at least with the statistics that characterize the structures. We see that there are clear differences between the simulation and observation. And we will continue to validate this result. And we will try to interpret. Now, the important point is to interpret the physical difference that we are seeing here. And that PhD thesis of Pablo Richard, who will begin this year with, in particular, François Levrier and myself. So I finish here. Thanks for your attention.
So are there questions for Erwan? Yes, Jerome has a question.
Yes, so in fact, I had two, but you answered my second one already. Does the WPH assume homogeneity of the statistical property with space? And if yes, how do you deal with the fact that we know that the physics change from one side to the other of the molecular cloud, for instance?
So does it assume homogeneity? I would say yes and no. Yes, because it assumes homogeneity. But to answer more specifically at your question, it's mainly no, because we consider an interaction between a lot of scales. And you can have interaction between the smallest scales and the largest scales that appear in your image, okay? And what you have as an information, it's, for instance, when you have a high level at a large scales, okay? All the level of the small scale can be higher also, okay? So all the correlation between small scale and high scale will lead to the fact that if you have an important modulation of the statistics of the small scales related to the structure at large scale, basically it will be characterized in these statistics. So we have to pay attention because we have to look at what are the larger scales that we characterize with our statistics, what are the main difference in scale that we consider for the interaction between scales. But basically, in a lot of tests that we did, and I can show you some image for the interstellar medium, we are able to reproduce huge variability of statistics at small scales due to all these interactions with the larger scale.
You want to ask your other question, Jerome? You're the only one asking questions.
The other one, he answered in the last part of his talk, no? Well,
yeah.
I ask what is the best metric to compare the coefficient of WPH and RWST, but you said that this was a Salmon metrics, no?
Okay, it's complicated. Here we introduce only reduced wavelet spectrum transform, which have the advantage is that you have a small number of coefficients that compress a lot of information.
Yes.
And we work with the Violet-Frise harmonic. You have a huge number of coefficients that all contain some information, but it's more difficult to have a low-dimensional representation. So we work with the Violet spectrum transform, and then the Salmon mapping was just a way to go from 100 dimension or 160, you see, to 2 or 3 dimension already to see the structure. But you see that's mainly one of the first exploratory things that you can do. As I didn't say that, but you can do that for the power spectrum, and you see that the simulation and the observational data match. Okay, so we wanted to compare it to the power spectrum. I didn't show it, and so that's the first way to look at the structure of your result. But there are a lot of other things that you can go, and I think that when presenting this result, one of the important things will be in particular to say, okay, you have a difference between the observational data and the observational data and the simulation, but can you describe it with words that we understand? I mean, what are the main differences from a statistical point of view in terms of coupling, in terms of anisotropy, local anisotropy, like anisotropy of the structure or global anisotropy or things like that. And that's what we will work on in the future.
Okay, thank you. So I suggest we have the break now.